Um, that closeness to a time when a number of us want to be away from here is increasing as well. So let's try and bear that in mind with the last few items if we can. So the next one up is now item 13, which is the city centre transport operations, including Midtown. Online, we've got Graham Gunthorpe, the program director of the city centre. Also present Simon Oddy and John Strawbridge, who will be following with the item after that as well. So over to our team there. Is it Graham?
Yeah. I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors, for your time. Slide, please. The purpose of this presentation is to respond to the governing body's request regarding how Midtown and the city centre will continue to provide efficient movement for people and goods throughout the upcoming works, especially in Midtown. So along with Simon Oddy and John Strawbridge, I also have Oliver Smith from the Development Program Office standing in for Jenny Larking, and he can handle any detailed questions about the Midtown construction works themselves. Slide, please. This presentation has three broad themes. There's the strategic alignment, access and movement, as well as the loading and servicing, acknowledging that that final point is certainly a hot button in the city centre, and there's far more complete accompanying report available in your pack. Slide, please. Transport is a key enabler of economic activity, jobs, goods, services, education. It's vital for growth, for meeting our climate targets, and it delivers on the city centre master plan, access for everyone, and that image you see on screen now is an example from that plan. It's also important to maximise the impact of City Rail Link. The city centre really is the engine room of the country. We're delivering this through multiple programs: public transport, network management, parking management, cycling infrastructure, and other capital investment. And as we deliver construction in Midtown and elsewhere in the city centre, we're managing the network with an eye to the future. We're helping with positive mode shift, and we're looking to improve choice for people. And I'd like to acknowledge the work and the views of Heart of the City, as well as other advocates. And I agree on the need for a holistic view for the city centre, and I'd like to think that's what we're working towards with our work program at the moment. Slide, please. Some context, how people get into the city in the morning peak. The graph on the left shows public transport percentage in top in green, pedestrians in lilac, and cycling in maroon. As at March of this year, 55% of commuters took public transport, walked or cycled. So it's an excellent positive mode shift coming back from the lows of COVID. Public transport really building momentum. This is only the entry data, of course. There's as well 40,000 odd people living here, and everyone becomes a pedestrian for the final part of their journey, whether it's from the car park to their desk, the ferry terminal to the classroom, or the bus stop to the shop. On the right, the graph shows a breakdown of that data by transport mode. Private vehicle use is the blue line. It's lower at 25,000 per day than it was before COVID, when it was around 35,000. Now, this may be due to constraints on the motorway network rather than in the city centre fringes. Remember, this is entry data only. And we've also had social structural changes, such as work from home. The positive growth trends in public transport and active modes can be seen in the dotted green line, and that's really driven by growth in bus patronage, which is the solid green line halfway along the halfway up the graph. Noting that this bus and public transport improvement is despite headwinds such as bus driver shortages and train line closures. Slide, please. For those who drive, this image shows circulation at the end of the year. Victoria Street reopens. The green section is Te Hanoa's. Wellesley Street bus-only section, which is proposed. The construction area shown in yellow between Albert Street and Queen Street. Noting that Albert Street, not yet reopened at this time. I've shown that in a dotted blue line. In line with access for everyone in the city centre master plan, there's a real focus on travelling to, not through. And a ring road has been formed. I've shaded that in blue around the outside. Nelson Hobson, Merrill, Simons, and Customs. That allows traffic to bypass Midtown freeing up that capacity for local businesses, residents and visitors. And we've really heard strongly that that capacity is needed to help those businesses thrive and the residents get around. Of course, the city centre has a much higher capacity ring road beyond this, the motorway network. So in future, we'll be encouraging drivers to enter and exit the city via the closest motorway exit, rather than traversing the city core. Now, we've heard from drivers in the public, as well as in focus groups and other forums. We acknowledge the challenges that some are experiencing with driving in the city centre. There is a lot of construction going on. There is no denying that. So we're planning public information campaigns, as well as improved digital and physical wayfinding for drivers, as well as those on foot and on bus. Slide, please. The driving map enables the creation of high efficiency, high reliability bus corridors. This is envisioned in the city centre bus plan, and this can really start to take shape as Albert Street reopens. Wellesley Street, we're proposing to deliver in 3 stages. The first central section to start either at the end of the year or early next year. And that yellow section really maximises the capability of City Rail Link, allowing better interchange. The Western buses along Pitt Street, Vincent and Albert, as I say, Albert Street reopening, it allows that corridor to come into its own. This city centre bus plan does envisage most services terminating on the city fringes as opposed to in the city centre, and that enables that curb space within the city centre to be freed up for other uses, loading, servicing, pickup, drop-off, etc. Slide, please. Looking at the Queen Street Valley itself, there are limited east-west routes. The Midtown projects consider Victoria, Wellesley and Merrill, which is the area highlighted in yellow, as a subsystem with alignment across all of them, providing at least 3 lanes per direction for general traffic, at least 1 lane each direction for buses, making sure that we maintain access for local residents and businesses like on Elliott Street. Now, it's important to note that in our construction sites, construction vehicles will not use Queen Street unless there's no alternative. There'll be active monitoring of traffic and construction site management, aiming to reduce clutter and cones, and contractors' vehicles will not be permitted to use the sites for car parking unless the vehicles are in active use. Slide, please. On to loading and servicing. As I said, this is one of the hot buttons for those in the city centre. So we have a number of forums, quarterly reference groups where we engage with businesses, residents and industry representatives. We've definitely heard about the increase in demand for loading and servicing. Now, that's come about for a couple of reasons. The changing nature of businesses, population growth, higher demand for deliveries, contractors, and pick up and drop off. And that varies across the time of the day and the day of the week. Slide. Back 2, please. Back, yeah. Perfect, thank you. Now, at the same time as this increased demand, there has been a reduction in available curb space, some of it due to construction disruption and some due to street redesigns, including bus priority and future cycle lanes. The image on screen shows every loading zone in the city centre as at 2022 with a 75-metre walking catchment around it. And I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Lee, who I presented this to a few days ago, who mentioned that for many businesses 75 metres is too far, and that's fair. However, there are some uses where it is very difficult to create new loading zones even more proximate. So, and some users can use that 75 meters. Anyway, so that is the analysis on screen. You'll notice there's high levels of service. Sorry, back one. Yeah, you'll notice there's high levels of service around our key retail areas, but that coincides with those high demand areas. And in our analysis, we also look at the off-street loading available. And unsurprisingly, our on-street loading zones are most prevalent in the areas where there are fewer off-street options. And in the future, we anticipate off-street being even more important for efficient running of the city. Slide. Now, the use and design challenges are exemplified by the image on screen. And this is our proposal for outside Beresford Square entrance to Karangahape Station. Now, this isn't in Midtown, and it's quite an extreme example, but it shows that areas where there's huge pedestrian flows, bus lanes, cycle lanes, and general traffic all coalescing have to be accommodated inside this narrow corridor, and we need to find alternative locations for those loading zones. In this case, we're proposing that Karangahape Road would have loading zones off-peak in certain areas, as well as on the side streets. The important thing to note here is we have to find balance between safety and amenity, bus efficiency, loading zones. We cannot have them all everywhere at all time. There is no nirvana, no utopia here. There must be balance found. So we're making sure we're working with industry and the public to find that balance. And what is right for one user may not be right for another. So we have to acknowledge that. We also need to be cognizant of the different demands at different times of day. It's especially important to enable the nighttime economy to flourish. And again, I'd like to point out the words of Viv talking about the theatre district in particular, pick-up drop-off. And we have actually added in pick-up drop-off zones within the Civic car park, and we'll be doing a launch of that soon. But it's an example of us reacting to what we're hearing from the community. Slide. We're making both strategic and tactical improvements to help businesses and residents. So we've been working with community liaison groups. For example, the Tiwai Horritu station have been very vocal in their need for more loading zones around the Albert Street and Victoria Street intersection. So we're looking to add loading zones as construction completes, and we're looking to be as transparent as possible, showing all the different options we are trying to find loading zones for them in. We're also improving enforcement through CCTV to ensure higher turnover of loading zones, so more businesses and residents can use them. A good example of that is on Federal Street, just north of the Sky Tower, where there are 6 loading zones. By increasing the turnover, we're effectively improving the availability for the businesses around there who are really at that pinch point of Albert and Victoria Streets. Onto the strategic side, we're refreshing our long-term strategy with the comprehensive parking management plan, now called Room to Move. This will be a 10-year plan delivered from January 2025, and really it will start to roll out as City Rail Link opens. It'll cover parking and curb space provision and management in the city centre. Importantly, it will consider the changing land use in the city. So what the demands are not only going to be now, but also into the future. And we'll, of course, be consulting with all stakeholders, residents, businesses, industry groups, local board to develop that strategy. And we aim that this strategy will identify those innovative opportunities like those Heart of the City have mentioned, responding to different needs of the city at different times of day. Slide. So the next steps specifically on Midtown. We're designing and implementing public information campaigns as part of those Midtown projects so people understand the changes that are about to occur. And there's a number of stakeholders. You may recall from the Midtown presentation by Jenny Larking, we not only have Development Program Office and Auckland Transport, but we also have Watercare and City Rail Link as well. So making sure that there's alignment between all of the agencies in our communications. And then updating the wayfinding, physical and digital, for people who are driving, for people on foot, bus, bike, however they choose to get in and get around the city, we need to be responding to them. And then ahead of the reopening of Victoria Street in late 2023 and the proposed change to Wellesley Street late 23 or early 2024, where it becomes bus only. Now, I'll just summarize. What have we heard? There will be capacity improvements as City Rail Link concludes that Victoria Street reopening, and that will necessitate changes to east-west journeys. Victoria Street reopen and Wellesley changes with the bus lane. That through traffic on the ring road, we'll need to communicate that effectively. But it will enable bus journeys on Wellesley Street, which in 2028 is forecast to have around 80 buses per hour in each direction. So that just shows the importance of Wellesley Street. And loading and servicing. It is going to remain challenging in the near future, but we are doing our best to work with businesses to help them through that, adding back loading zones where possible, as well as enforcement through CCTV. And with that, I'd like to hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Can I compliment you on your very succinct and professional presentation there? That was well delivered. We've also had a fairly comprehensive report here, folks, and we've been through this previously. If there are any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, yes, Councillor David.
Thanks, Chair. And Graham, great to see you presenting to us. Hey, you said something about room to move being implemented in 2025. That somewhat shocked me. I thought room to move was in the stages of being implemented like now, can you just
Sure, happy to. So the parking strategy for the Auckland region is called Room to Move. So this will be a subset of it, Room to Move for the city centre. And they are planning that the report will be accepted and approved and become policy essentially from January 2025. The actual implementation of the recommendations it make will take time after that.
Okay, I'll look at that. In terms of micro freight delivery systems, we've got Urgent Couriers, a commercial company that have got a bicycle system. We're looking at micro freight system in the downtown complex, and there's a big void in loading zones in that area. What are your discussions with that particular company and possibly others in expanding the micro freight delivery so that you don't have a reliance on the big traditional, my truck's arriving, I need some space for it, please, to deliver you this small parcel?
Maybe I can jump in, Graham, if you like.
Please.
Councillor, through the chair, John Strawbridge here. Yeah, look, our parking design team working on a regular basis with the freight industry in the city centre, Councillor, and not only have we looked at new initiatives, but rekindled some old ones as well. Some of the learnings that we taken out of Sydney in terms of booking spaces that are in off-site locations. We've also looked at Victoria Street car park as another collaboration in terms of if you like, a degorging of larger freight vehicles and then e-bike or e-scooter type deliveries out of there, as well as the civic car park. Downtown, yes, options there within the downtown car park also being considered in terms of some small freight drop-off. So well and truly underway, but it is very organic at the moment. As we all know, in the city centre, things move very quickly in terms of a road is open today and then not tomorrow. So the team is onto it, and as I said, working with the freight industry directly on a regular basis.
Thank you. Just two more questions, small ones, Chair. While I've got you there, John, thank you. Mobility and access is reliant on good enforcement too, John, and that's your patch, you know it well, of course. We've got some sort of big issues, you know, after hours, late with Ubers, as I mentioned to you earlier this morning, John, in an email. But I'm hearing it from City Centre Residents Group and a lot of others about how mobility and access is being obstructed by rideshare vehicles that are, you know, colonising public space when maybe we don't have that as Auckland Council. Auckland Transport doesn't have the enforcement in place to make sure that, you know, the public realm, the qualities of the public realm are maintained, you know, well into the evening. How are we tracking on making sure we get, you know, resource people in place to ensure that enforcement is there to, you know, maintain the amenity that we expect?
Yeah, for sure. Through the chair, Councillor, we've, as Graham alluded to, we have invested in CCTV and remote enforcement, which is a follow-up to the offending, if you like. So at the time, they're not getting caught, but they're getting the ticket later. We are increasing our patrols in the evenings. This is by virtue of overtime provision now, rather than personnel, as we are not fully staffed across the region. Our night shift staff at the moment for Tamaki Makaurau is 6 staff from Poki through to Wellsford. So yeah, resourcing is a challenge for us, but we have a number of staff that are willing to work the extra hours and do some targeted enforcement. In particular, those photographs that you sent me this morning are quite disturbing in terms of the flow of bus services. So my team are onto that straight away.
Look, thank you. And one last one, and I'd like a comment from Simon too on something that happened recently. But Graham, I'm a regular walker of the valley to and fro from here to the ferry, and 3 years ago, I could pass 2 CityLink buses walking down the street. Now 2 CityLink buses walk past me as I go down Queen Street, and emergency vehicles have free access there as well. Are you hearing from Auckland Transport, Auckland Transport and emergency services, that access through the core of the city centre is a lot more reliable now than pre the pedestrian or partial pedestrianisation and streetscape improvement project on Queen Street itself?
Yeah, so we meet with emergency services in a quarterly forum, and they have been positive about Queen Street. They have had instances where they've been held up. I won't say it's always been perfect, but the statistics on the free-flowing bus traffic and reduction in general traffic on Queen Street speaks for itself. The fact that we are able to get vehicles that need to be in the Queen Street corridor through there more efficiently than previously. I'd also like to point out that air quality has improved 22% between January and December in 2022, and noise levels have been reduced, particularly in the early hours, well, that is after 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m.
And I'm pushing it, Chair, but I've got one little one. Finally, Simon, I was in discussion with you recently. I was rather surprised to see some changes on High Street North outside Debrett's. I'm, a councillor that's been really at the coalface of the city centre improvements, along with others. I contacted you. You didn't seem to know much about it. Now you're our implementation lead there. You've been conferred that job by this body, and it's your opportunity, Simon. Can you tell us what happened there? There seemed to be some disconnects between departments and some outcomes that some city centre residents are very surprised to see. In fact, they feel like it's going backwards on the northern part of High Street. Others, I'm sure, will think it's the bee's knees and I can park my truck outside. Or your BMW, as I saw yesterday in the loading zone. So, Simon, can you just maybe tell us what happened there, please? Because there's a lot of people that are pretty disgruntled about that outcome.
Yes, kia ora, and thanks for the question, Councillor. So as a lot of the councillors may be aware, there's been some disquiet amongst stakeholders within the High Street district as to the state of the street. The upgrades that had been, the temporary upgrades that had been applied, I can't remember the exact date, but they have been in place for a number of years now, had started to grade over time. One particular area where there had been a lot of damage to the temporary boardwalk outside the Debrett's space, as you had identified, Councillor, that had been regularly damaged through vehicle usage, collisions and the likes. It became a maintenance issue, as I understand, for Council and Auckland Transport, and the decision was made at a certain point to replace the boardwalk in that location with planters. However, obviously those planters prevented the area from being able to be used as either pedestrian space or parking space, and were collecting rubbish. And it wasn't initially signalled as part of the planned improvements to enhance the look and feel of the space in response to the stakeholder feedback that had been received, which was largely to be focused on sort of cosmetic issues, removal of rubbish, the upgrade and better maintenance of the planters and the likes. But what has transpired is, with the removal of those planters, instead of the that parking space being reduced returned to pedestrian use, it has been returned to parking use, and that appears to have been a communication issue or breakdown between the different departments and the work was going on, and a lack of consultation with city centre residents groups in particular on that. I can appreciate both sides of the story, and we need to ensure that that area is being used as a productive space, and I understand that was the rationale behind the decision to return it to parking. I just want to provide confidence, however, that it doesn't signal a change in the strategy for that space, for that street. It isn't to be returned to full parking, so the boardwalks on the eastern side will remain in place. And as the business case for the future upgrades of High Street roll out, what form and function that street takes in the future will be considered as part of that.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
Yeah.
questions, Chair.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I just had to take a call in the middle of Councillor Darby's questions. It may have been answered. Could you please explain if the ring road will get any kind of signal priority? Because if that's where, the drivers are being asked to go, will they get any prioritisation around that?
So we're working on the indicative business case for access for everyone at the moment, and that is likely to get to approvals middle of next year. So that business case will be making recommendations of that type. In the interim, we will need to make sure that wayfinding, etc., and any relevant network management tools are put in place. But I'm going to have to get back to you on what our network management team recommend.
Yeah, I'd appreciate you just giving me an email on that, Graham. Thank you. Thanks, Chair. You're doing a good job.
So thank you, Councillor Simpson. Okay, I'm happy to move the update. We have a seconder, please. Councillor Darby. Any comments? Councillor.
I just wanted to give a comment because I didn't want to ask it in question, but just want to say that the new way forward has been really helpful with Simon and team, and it's fantastic to see so many pedestrians quieter in the corridor, and the reduction in poor air quality in the Queen Street Valley, which was the worst in the whole city, it is reducing, which is fantastic as well. And it's great to see that public transport is again, and walking and cycling is beating vehicle movements in the city centre, and those pedestrian counts are back to pre-COVID levels in the city centre. So awesome, and keen to see more progress. Thanks.
Right, thank you. So it's been moved, it's seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, against. So, okay, thank you, Graham, Simon and John. John, you're back on now. Item 14, and this is one I'm certainly been looking forward to today. If Councillor Darby was mildly excited by the VKTs, I'm going a bit beyond that with listening to the transport officers to see what actually happens on the ground on our transport network, some of which might not be all that enjoyable. So, John, over to you for the introduction. You're muted, John.
There we go. Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm looking forward to presenting my two fantastic transport officers to you this afternoon as well. But by way of introduction, if I could just go to the first slide, please. So, look, a very brief history. I'm not going to read this all out. I think the forum has had an opportunity to look at it before, but really the beginning of the journey for the transport officers was in 2015. Where we had a real increase. I pick up, some of you in the room may be aware of incidents of disorder and fare evasion and a whole lot of associated criminal activity in and around the rail network. With the introduction of some legislation and some very, very close work between the New Zealand Police, that time the Commissioner, and Auckland Transport, we were able to establish the first cohort of transport officers in the country, and they were obviously came from pretty much zero through to hero quite quickly. Next slide, please. So this really highlights the authority that in which these transport officers operate on the network. Under the LGA, the transport officers are able to prosecute in terms of the failure to pay a public transport service fee, and also the associated warrant from the commissioner is approved, and they're deployed out into the network. Just a point to note that only the transport officers that are qualified by knowledge and experience are able to undertake the enforcement functions, and that warrant is a highly regarded warrant, and I guess on a daily basis used with pride by our team. The training is all done in-house by Auckland Transport, and the content is approved by the Royal New Zealand Police College. So extensive work goes into preparing our people before they go out and service in the community. Slide, please. So our everyday focus now, I'm not going to say too much here because you have two of our most experienced officers to have some time with in Q&A as we go through this afternoon. But currently we have 40 officers, 5 supervisors and a management team in behind. Look, they're providing great customer service and information, enhancing the journey experience. Safety and security is high on their radar always. Always able to assist with incidents and emergencies on the network, and very importantly, making sure that everyone's paying their way and we're paying their fare. With the transport officer team being a smaller contingent, what we use is a risk-based intelligence deployment model where effectively we're deploying our officers to the trouble spots that we know of based on the intelligence that's brought in from our officers, but also from the public by way of Crime Stoppers, and also our relationships, which I'll address in the next slide now, please. So, as well as the normal day-to-day work for our officers, we're working this evening with the events at Eden Park, and that's one of the great parts of the service that our team provides as well, with the special events that are so successful in Tamaki Makaurau. Their teams are on the ferries, at the ferry terminals, looking after the patronage over the summer peak periods and security issues around the wharves, and the concerts at Mount Smart, Western Springs, queue management, and also, and quite significantly after the events of today, targeted operations and partnerships with the New Zealand Police. So today our officers were deployed in 2 phases with the unfortunate incidents downtown. The first phase was to help with the road closures and on those cordons, and the second phase was with crowd control as we were starting to reopen the lower part of the city. Again, those officers deployed in partnership with the police. Auckland One Rail, another significant partner, obviously the rail operator, Armaguard, our bus operators, first responders, but I think importantly, and you'll probably hear it from my team there, the travelling public of Auckland, and the partnership with that travelling